in the next 20, he's not doing it.
Do you talk about force-ranking government? What's the bottom of that ranking?
I don't know, because I haven't done it.
What's at the top?
I haven't done it. What's at the top? Well, I think that the likely things that might fall to the top are those things that involve protection of life and property. Those are the things that I typically would put at the top.
So
But a
Vermont State
government,
Police is the top.
the government,
Is that
and a
your
government,
Vermont State Police is
just a
the top?
second, let me finish. A governor is not necessarily going to be the only one who's going to be force ranking. Let's face it, we operate in a government of collaboration. We have a government of multiple branches, and as a leader, my focus is, yes, to force rank them. Clearly, this is something that I've done in business, and those are the hard decisions. The hard decisions would be in what we recommend to the General Assembly. Whether the General Assembly agrees with it sometimes is a different
What
thing.
would be number two? Number one's protection of life and property. What's number two?
I don't know. I would say probably, well, I won't say I don't know. I do know.
What is it?
I'd say that the protection of Vermont's most vulnerable citizens. And again, that is an offshoot of the protection of life and property.
Can you define,
Those are the things that are near the top.
can you define force rank? I've never heard the term before.
Sure, force rank, if you picture a list of things that you might do, let's say a list of things that you might do in chores around the home. It might be repairing the roof, it might be cutting the grass, it might be planting flowers, it might be changing a light bulb. Well, which of those tasks is the most important? Well, that goes at the top of your list. Then which is the next most important, and that goes in the second position. And then somewhere along the line, there'll be something that's less important at the bottom of the list. Now, as you talk about government functions, I don't believe anything that we do in government in Montpelier is bad. We do a lot of good things. We do a lot of important things. But somewhere, some things have to be more important than others.
So protecting.
We have to prioritize what we do because we have a finite amount of money. And we have two choices as to how we spend that money. The first thing we can do is what we've done historically. And that is to say, well, we've got all these things in government that we want to do. And we don't have enough money to do them all. So we'll do all of them a bit badly by taking 2, 3, 4, or 5% from them. And what I'm saying is that that is not the approach of tough choices.
So does that mean?
That is the choice of simply saying that we are going to be satisfied with doing everything in a mediocre fashion, as opposed to deciding what things we need to do especially well. And for those things, we place them at a higher priority, and to make the tough choice that maybe there's some things in government that we either find another way to do, that if we can't make them more efficient, there's a point at which gaining efficiencies in any operation stops. There's no more efficiency to be gained. We're not there yet. We've got a ways to go in government.
So does this mean you're going to be hiring more counselors for adult protective services, for example?
I didn't say I was going to hire anyone
So
in
what
particular.
is
But what I
protecting
did say is this, is that in reducing the size of state government, because we have these large numbers of folks who are retiring, that we may well want to redefine what jobs we fill again. We're not going to replace everybody who retires. We're not going to hire everybody for the same job who went away. And there may well be those jobs on the front line in which we do need more staff than we have today. We may find that there are more jobs, let's say, in the middle of government that we need less of. One of my focuses in all of this is to empower state employees more than they're empowered right now. The best companies in America empower their employees. They give them more freedom. They don't mire them in red tape and regulations and rules and supervisory restrictions. They give them more flexibility by using principle-based rules. That's also part of re-engineering government.
So does this mean you're going to cut state government by 25%?
No, I didn't say 25%.
You said 25% of the workforce.
I said 25% of the state workforce is scheduled to retire within the next 5 years. But what I said also is that some of those people and some of those jobs we're going to hire again for, and some of them we're not.
So do you have a number in mind?
What do you mean by crony capitalism?
By crony capitalism, I'm referring to renewable energy, and what I refer to and kindly as the renewable industrial complex. cases in which we subsidize large-scale renewable energy projects or large-scale renewable energy expenditures that ratepayers pay for at 4, 5, 6, and 7 times the market for periods of 20 to 25 years in the future, thus burdening poor and working Vermonters with high costs for electricity. Costs, by the way, that are much more significant to poor and working Vermonters because electricity cost represents a significantly higher percentage of their income. And in return for which, renewable energy entrepreneurs are able to get huge tax breaks, tax subsidies, and tax credits up front today.
So would you eliminate the Clean Energy Development Fund?
I would look very closely at the Clean Energy Development Fund, and I certainly would look at the standard offer. I would certainly look at the purchase of high-cost, renewable power that is non-base load power. I would look very, very carefully, and I certainly would focus on a moratorium on industrial wind on Vermont's ridge lines.
Are there certain cronies that you're particularly worried about? I mean, that seems like it's a pretty loaded charge. What
I don't
companies
know
and
that it's a
what people-
loaded charge. I think you can decide who's getting the money and the public can decide that for themselves. I'm not going to name names.
But I mean, who do you think
I'm
is?
not going to name names.
What would your target be in terms of reducing the size of state government? What do you think you could really, is there a number you'd like to hit, or what could you
If
realistically?
there was a realistic number, I would say certainly 10% in the size of state government. If we're looking at a workforce that right now is somewhere in the range of 7,600 approximately, and that number I know may not be precise, so I won't hold to it, but somewhere in that range. But that's a reasonable, I think that's a reasonable estimate as to what you can achieve. I'd like to perhaps do more than that, but what I want to do is I want to make sure that government is the right size to deliver key services to Vermonters and to deliver it in an effective way. A great deal of what you have to do, I think, can be achieved through better efficiency, through process redesign, through technology, and through re-engineering government.
You mentioned that you're here at IP Capital Group and they really out state or federal funds, but then you have this business in a box program. How can you be sure that you wouldn't be wasting state money on creating a program that would then fail eventually?
Well, there's never an assurance that something won't fail. That's part of risk. In risk, you take prudent risks. And the key of this business in a box concept is that we're not talking about state money here. You know, when we talk about the capital necessary to do it, we're talking about private investment. We're talking about getting with banks. You know, I mentioned angel investors, I mentioned venture capital firms, I mentioned sources of private financing. I'm not putting the state in the business of subsidizing business any more than we do right now with the programs that we have, such as VITA and other programs.
You write that you want to audit every state low job training business tax review programs. Do you have a few in mind, especially besides renewable?
Do I have
A few programs in mind that you want to audit, especially?
well, I think that a broad audit, I would leave that, and the principal audit function there would be the state auditor's office. I would leave that to the state auditor to perhaps look at where to start. But I think that there are a number that that would warrant audit. And typically when you audit, you do it on the basis of a risk-based audit process. Many of the state functions are looked at annually in the annual audit process, which is a risk-based audit. I'm 5 years behind in having looked at the work papers of the risk-based audit of the state's financial statements. The current statements, though, should be a guide to where to devote more of that effort, where to start first. And generally, it's like Willie Sutton, the bank robber, said, you start where the money is.
Flat tax?
Beg pardon?
Are you interested in flat tax?
Well, there's some states that have moved towards the flat tax for individuals at state tax level. Massachusetts, for example, has a flat tax. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Rhode Island recently moved to a flat tax. I think that is something that if we have a Blue Ribbon Tax Commission, I think a tax commission ought to be a bipartisan commission that looks carefully at what the option. That's something that might be considered, but you know, we did have, I think, a very good job done by the Blue Ribbon Tax Commission. I didn't agree with each and everything, but we had both a majority and majority opinion. There was relatively little dissent in the minority opinion, and a flat tax did not emerge from their review of the corporate individual, the individual income tax. So I think a flat income tax, at least in the foreseeable future, is not on the horizon for Vermont. Vermont has a long tradition of being quite progressive in its application of the individual income tax rate, and I suspect that's probably not going to change.
What do you think of the news out of Jay last week?
I think it's great news. I think if it comes about, if those jobs do occur, I think it'll be a tremendous boost in the arm for the region. I think this is an outgrowth. You recall Governor Douglas and Bill Stenger went to China, met with ANC, I believe it was 2008, 2009, and that began to move the ball forward. These projects take a long time to come to fruition. I think it's very interesting.